Hola a todos, soy la profesora Antoski. Hello everyone, I'm Mrs. Antoski. I'm one of the Spanish teachers here at Stony Creek High School. Thank you for joining me tonight on our virtual curriculum night to learn a little bit more about what to expect learning Spanish this year. There are three components to what I'm going to share with you tonight. I'll share a little bit about myself. I will share the specifics and important information for your course, and I will close with a brief message in Spanish. So let's get started. So first, I would like to share just a little bit of information about me so you know a little bit more about who will be guiding your student in the language learning process this year. So like I said, I'm Mrs. Antoski. I am one of the Spanish teachers here at Stony. Prior to being here at Stony, I've also taught at Hart Middle School and our virtual campus. This is my proud ninth year in education, and I've been speaking Spanish for much longer than that. And it's something I love, and it's something that has changed my life. So I'm so excited to share that with my students. Prior to teaching here in Rochester Community Schools, and I've been here for the past 4 years, I taught in an IB program at the International Academy, or the IA, that some of you may know. And that was an amazing experience as well. But what led me here to Rochester Community Schools is that my husband and I live in this community, and he also is a proud graduate of Stony Creek High School and attended Hart Middle School and grew up here. So knowing that we live in the school system and that our children will attend these schools, it has just been awesome to teach in the community that we live in and that we love so much. So I share with students that I was not a Spanish speaker growing up. I didn't know anybody or have anybody in my friends or family that spoke Spanish. And it was not until I started taking Spanish in high school that I fell in love with it and really saw it as an opportunity to do in the future. So with the help of a lot of great mentors and some amazing native speakers, I grew to be able to speak Spanish. And I share that with my students who may feel a little discouraged or intimidated in learning a language, especially if this is their first time learning a second language, because it is possible. I share with them that even myself, I take weekly classes with a good friend of mine who's from Barcelona to keep up on Spanish myself. So their Spanish learning is a lifelong journey, and there's always ways that you can improve and get better and practice. And there are so many amazing Spanish speakers that are willing to help and befriend you and join you in your learning process. A little bit more about myself. So before wanting to become a Spanish teacher, I really always thought that I would enter into the special education world. And that's because I'm the proud older sister of two adults with autism. And in my spare time, I work with several nonprofits that support individuals with special needs. I was the former director of a nonprofit that has a camp experience for individuals with special needs. So it's something I'm really passionate about. And how I bring that into my teaching is just being really passionate about inclusion and passionate about building skills to form relationships with people who are different than us. And whether that's because they speak another language or because they have other differences, there's so much rich opportunity to form relationships with people that we might not know about. And especially in the education world, when I have students that are interested in learning Spanish, but maybe they're intimidated by it, or maybe it's something that they struggle with. It's a way that I really want to make learning Spanish and learning about the culture accessible to all of my students, and to build a community that focuses on being kind to one another and including one another. I share with my students that a big part of being successful in learning Spanish is building community and talking to one another and having conversations. And the way to do that successfully is to have a culture in your classroom where students feel that they can take risks and that they trust one another and that they support one another, or if they feel awkward, they can laugh it off a bit. And that's something that I really try to build in my course and encourage my students to embody as well. So if you want to know any more information, I have some more information here. I'm going to link the bio of my website in the description below. So now I'm going to speak specifically about each of the individual courses. So I'm going to dive into that right now. Okay, Español uno. So let's talk about Spanish 1 and what to expect in your first course of learning Spanish. Again, this is my website. It is linked below in the description if you want to read more about the syllabus that's in detail. But I'm just going to walk you through some of the most important takeaways of what to expect this year. So I have some goals listed. You can see that this is following our Michigan and district standards, that our goal is for students to be able to begin the foundations of building skills to communicate in the language, to understand the culture and make comparisons between the target culture and their own, and to make connections through the Spanish language to their own world and the communities around them. In Spanish 1, we start to lay the foundation of learning Spanish, the skills that are most needed in learning Spanish. We'll learn greetings, we'll learn to talk about our own lives, we'll learn to make comparisons with our classmates, and we'll learn to make comparisons between our lives and the lives of Spanish speakers who live around the world. Students will focus on a variety of modalities, including speaking, listening, writing, reading in Spanish, and so much of what we do is focused on using the language and applying the language. So even at a very early stage in Spanish, you will see at a daily basis students using the target language, and that really is our goal to improve. So some things that students can expect is a high use of Spanish language. We try to give students a lot of input in learning the language, and the goal is not for them to understand 100%, but the goal is for them to have a lot of audio input and exposure to the language. So I will be using a lot of Spanish. Students themselves will be having daily conversations in Spanish to get comfortable with using the target language. There will be a lot of in-class experiences that involve trying things. It might be everyone going around their room and trying to share their birth date, or doing a guided conversation with a partner. It might be a mini project that relates to a topic that we're learning, and performance assessments. So really the assessments that we do in Spanish are, what can you do with the language? Maybe it's reading a little bio about someone and their likes and dislikes and answering some questions. Maybe it's coming up and sharing with me a simulated conversation that they have with a partner. So that is a really critical component of what we do in all of our Spanish courses here in the district. To talk a little bit about some of the ways that students might be assessed in these areas, they might be doing an interpretive activity, which you see here is listed as possibly listening to an audio source and answering question, talking about what they hear, talking about what they see, maybe seeing a commercial or an advertisement in Spanish and talking about it. It might be an interpersonal activity, which means they're doing something with another person. So it could be having a one-on-one conversation with me. When we start learning about how to talk about our family, we might have a conversation where they bring in a photo and explain the different family members and what they're like and what they look like. Might be presentational, where they share something about themselves, or they do a little mini presentation. So these are all things that are, we spend a lot of time building student skills and confidence to be able to get to this step. Our grades are broken down into two categories. Our formative activities, which include warm-ups that we do, activities, assignments that might be on Google Classroom as 60% of the grade, and the different types of assessments that I just mentioned make up 40% of the grade. To talk a little bit about late work, this year I know we're still continuing on a lot of new and different as we face the pandemic, but the general policy is that the work should be completed on time. I really try to provide students with the opportunity to engage in some of those learning activities in the classroom, but because Spanish builds off of each topic, and it is very difficult for a student to be successful if they wait until the end of the semester to try to complete things. It's really imperative that students complete work on time. So of course, there are always extenuating circumstances, but the general rule of thumb is that, work work that is late will incur a late penalty, and that work that is turned in after a week past the due date is not accepted for credit unless in the case of an extenuating circumstance, or if there's an accommodation plan in place, or if we work something out, or if a student is missing. I've already communicated to students, please stay home if you're sick, so they will not be penalized if they miss an assessment or a quiz, if they're quarantining, or if they're staying home sick. That's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking more about just your daily workload management and trying to turn in assignments on time, beyond what might be something that's going on in their life, like a trip or an extended absence. So I just really encourage students to be having open communication with me if they know they're going to miss a day that we might do an assessment, or if they know they're not going to be present if there's a due date on something. And I am flexible. I always try to work out an alternative with students, but I really try to encourage them to be their own advocate, so that way we can form a plan in place together. So I've spoken a lot with students about expectations for them as learners, and I'm not going to go through everything in this video, but I encourage you to maybe talk through some of these things with your students. You can find it, like I said, linked in the description below, but there's a lot of things here that I'm encouraging all students to have the mindset coming into this class, whether it's having a growth mindset, to respecting the people in our classroom always, to observe our academic honesty policy, to make an effort to communicate in Spanish, to come to class prepared. And a lot of these are just general, great practices in being a successful student, but some of them are really pertinent in terms of learning Spanish. And lastly, another thing that is so critical when learning a second language is I tell students that they need to be engaging with the language outside of the class. If a lot of times actual assignments or things that we're doing with a partner are done in class, because that's when they have access to other Spanish speakers. But I tell students, even if you don't have a homework assignment, you should be engaging with Spanish almost on a daily basis for at least 10 or 15 minutes. So that could be just like reviewing your vocab words on Quizlet. That could be, when you're getting ready for school, just repeating words to yourself. That might be watching a show in Spanish. That might be practicing with a sibling who has taken Spanish. That could include just reviewing your notes for a couple minutes after school, because a lot of times when students are feeling really overwhelmed and doing a performance assessment, a lot of times part of the reason is because they only are engaging with Spanish within the four walls of this classroom, and they're not really practicing outside of school, which doesn't lead them to feel as prepared and confident as they could. So I definitely encourage students to find a way, whether it's doing Duolingo for 10 minutes in the car on the way home, or quizzing your friends, at the end of lunch, to find some way that you are having a little bit of Spanish input each day to build your confidence. Okay, so now I'm going to share a little message in Spanish with you before we part. Thanks. So to my students and their loved ones, thank you so much for checking out this video and learning more about the course and everything that is to come. I'm so excited to continue this learning journey with you. To close, I would like to share a parting message in Español. It's a little bit about how meaningful it has been learning Spanish for me, and a short poem about the benefits of being bilingual or knowing more than one language. For my students and their families who are new to learning Spanish, I have the English as well as the Spanish transcribed as I'm speaking. And to my Spanish-speaking families and students, I hope you enjoy this message as well. Estoy muy orgullosa de poder ser su maestra de español este ciclo escolar. Gracias por acompañarme en este camino de aprendizaje. A los padres que miran este video, voy a ser la maestra de sus hijos este año escolar. Me gustaría que ustedes también se sientan bienvenidos en este camino, para que juntos demos apoyo a sus hijos y trabajemos en equipo. A mis alumnos, este año van a aprender a leer, cantar y hablar en español. Les prometo un año lleno de crecimiento y diversión. Pero de vez en cuando Cada uno de nosotros vamos a encontrarnos con un desafío o fracaso. Aprender un nuevo idioma es divertido, pero no es fácil. Mi vida cambió cuando aprendí otro idioma. Hay un poema titulado Bilingüe por Alma Flor Hada que me encanta. Quiero compartirlo con ustedes. Porque hablo español, puedo oír los cuentos de mi abuelita y decir familia, madre, amor. Porque hablo inglés, puedo aprender de mi maestra y decir I love school. Porque soy bilingüe, puedo leer libros y books. Tengo amigos y friends. Disfruto canciones y songs, juegos y games, y me divierto el doble. Y algún día, porque sé hablar 2 idiomas, podré hacer el doble de cosas, ayudar al doble de personas y hacer lo que haga el doble de bien. Espero que esta experiencia cambie su vida como ha cambiado la mía. Gracias, adiós.